Benjamin Netanyahu made a very interesting statement today. And he said that if we don't reach a ceasefire today, we will reach a ceasefire tomorrow. There was a lot of talk after Benjamin Netanyahu made that statement. Several people in Israel, especially with the families of the prisoners of war, were very happy. But then they had a different clarification from his office. So this was the report coming from Israel. PM hopes for good news tomorrow. He said, if there won't be good news today, there will be good news tomorrow, he said. And we're working to get a deal. Now, from the tone of Benjamin Netanyahu and from his statement, it appeared to be that he's actually saying, I really hope that we're going to, if we're not going to get good news today, we're going to get good news tomorrow, alongside all of the other reports that Hamas accepted a ceasefire deal, with the previous statements from Trump that hopefully will announce a ceasefire agreement towards the weekend. But then his office said that he didn't mean it concretely. He actually made a statement that is more broad, as in, if we won't reach an agreement today, we'll reach it tomorrow. You know how we always say, if it wouldn't happen today, it's going to happen tomorrow. Now, this led to a lot of disappointment amongst Israel, especially the families of the prisoners of war. And then they started to say that, this Gideon's chariots situation is probably going to lead us to, another Hannibal directive. And we don't want another Hannibal directive. Don't make this another Hannibal directive. How is that sitting with Benjamin Netanyahu's talks internally with the people who are threatening to resign? There are people who in the Israeli government threatening to resign, and now it's actually escalating even further, with one of the senior ministers inside of the Benjamin Netanyahu government making very dangerous statements against the Likud party led by Benjamin Netanyahu. He's the labor minister, Yoav Ben Tzur. The proposed conscription law and the Likud MKs who, according to him, want to erase the Haredi public from the public sphere. He said studying Torah will not be considered a criminal offense in the Jewish state. So we have an outright attack from a minister in the Netanyahu government against the party that is led by Benjamin Netanyahu, the Likud party, saying that these people want to erase the Haredi community from all of the Israeli public. They want us out. Then there are serious talks about people resigning from the Israeli government, saying that it seems that relations between Prime Minister Netanyahu and the Haredi parties have recently hit a snag from which it will be difficult to recover. They're saying what the rabbis really think of Netanyahu and what will lead to the dissolution of the coalition, stating more criticism coming from the rabbis in Israel against Benjamin Netanyahu and against all of these attempts by the Netanyahu government to force conscription and to punish people who will not actually follow the rules of the government and the orders of the Israeli government. And it didn't just end there. There are now outright considerations to collapse the government, with this recent statement from the leader of the Lithuanian current line, considering withdrawing from the coalition due to the delay in the exemption from the conscription. Rabbi Moshe Hillel Hirsch spoke with the son of Rabbi of Gur, Nehemiah Alter, and said that the responsibility of the Degel HaTorah party withdrawing from the coalition due to the failure to advance the conscription law is being considered. Rabbi Hirsch said that before making a decision on the matter, he will speak with the other Haredi leaders and MKs from the party. So there are concrete moves coming from leading figures in the coalition of Israel saying that we are going to resign. Why? Because they know what they're expecting. So they're reaching a boiling point, an end of the road scenario, because Benjamin Netanyahu isn't at a level where he can continue and drag this more and more and have these new sort of deals. He's asking for people to go and die for him in Gaza, in this genocide, but he is refusing to force, almost half of the population to go and fight. So therefore, it's strengthening the argument that's coming against him from the population, primarily the secular population, telling him that why are we having all of this burden? Why are we paying the price for all of this genocide and your war when you don't want to send the people from the Haredi community. This is making this is causing a lot of trouble inside of Israel. Then there is outright criticism now coming from the Israeli president with no way to explain it apart from a direct criticism against Benjamin Netanyahu. Usually the Israeli president, he will try and be as diplomatic as possible, as moderate as possible with the statements that he makes, especially with a very tense situation politically, such as it is now or has been for several years now. So Herzog said, let no one think of disobeying court rulings. I warn and forbid no one should be thinking of disobeying neither the rulings of the courts nor the provisions of the law. In the Jewish and democratic state of Israel, the rule of law is not a recommendation, but an essential existential rule. Anyone who even discusses the possibility of violating the law and the rulings of the court harms Israeli statehood and sovereignty. So in fact, you have the Israeli president saying now that the prime minister is harming the statehood of Israel and its sovereignty and its democracy, and it's also its Jewishness. Outright criticism. He is causing this friction with a man who is supposed to be a person who's really in between even the public anger and the prime minister, but he's even breaking that. Now, moving on to Gaza. Israel is, of course, excelling at its genocide and barbarism, next level stuff inside of the Gaza Strip, claims that they're controlling 77%. The Palestinian authorities inside of the Gaza Strip say that Israel is present and is occupying by force and by at gunpoint, expelling people from about 77% of the Gaza Strip. What does that actually mean on the ground? And does this mean this is a defeat for the Palestinian side with this progression of the Israeli genocide forces inside of the Gaza Strip? Not at all. Why? Because the people of Gaza are still in Gaza. We don't have mass exodus. We don't have people fleeing in their hundreds of thousands. They are still inside of the Gaza Strip. Now, of course, the genocide state and the terror army of Israel would dictate, displace people. Many people have been displaced over a dozen times or even more than that in Gaza, being killed everywhere they go. That doesn't mean that Israel has control over the Gaza Strip. That means Israel is present inside of the Gaza Strip in certain parts of Gaza. Does that affect the resistance? Does that affect the long-term presence of the Palestinians? Well, of course, there is risk of the presence of the Palestinians, especially if, for example, other countries collaborate with Israel to expel the population and the ethnic cleansing campaign gets implemented. However, we're seeing a shift from the main backer of this whole plan, which is Donald Trump, who's no longer talking about this mass exodus and ethnic cleansing that he used to talk about previously. Egypt is still not playing ball with Israel in relation to the ethnic cleansing. They haven't played ball since October 2023, despite international pressure. Israel's main allies in the United States and Europe were pushing and applying pressure on Egypt to take the population. That was the main exit, and Egypt was blocking that exit. Now Israel controls the Rafah border. Israel controls the Philadelphia corridor, yet despite that, they're not opening the Philadelphia corridor. They're not opening the borders with Egypt for the people to flee. Why? Because they know there's going to be repercussion, and they know that there is quite a hostile side on the Egyptian side. And we're going to get to that in a bit. That's not going to happen unless you're going to bring like massive boats from the sea, and then people will willingly start to leave Gaza. Although the statements from the people is that despite all of this destruction, all of this genocide in Gaza, they are not planning to leave actually. And they are willing to die in their land and not leave again. Why? Because 73% of them before the 7th of October already are refugees from Haifa, from Yafa, from Led, Asqalan, and Sdoud, and other parts of occupied Palestine, or modern-day Israel, what is called modern-day Israel. And they know very well that when they leave, they're not allowed to go back. Therefore, from their perspective, let me die here, and the only place I'm going to leave for is heaven. This is what the people of Gaza are saying. And the resistance isn't stopping whatsoever. Today, there was another report coming from Al-Qassam brigades that they target Israeli tanks and soldiers in the Beit Lahia operations. According to the reports that are coming from the Al-Qassam brigades, the body parts of the Israeli terror forces was spreading everywhere after these operations happened. Beit Lahia is in the north, very significant, because the north of Gaza is supposed to be a place that Israel well said it was done with from a very, very, very long time ago, before they invaded Rafah. The fact that they're facing such fierce resistance in North Gaza shows you that these people have no active control over the ground. They're there, but the resistance is there, and the population is there. And of course, the civilian population will pay the price and are paying the price. But in the grand scheme of things, there are still operations coming from the Palestinian resistance, 18 months into a full-blown genocide, with over 100,000 tons of TNT landing on Gaza, over 5 times the equivalent of the nuclear bombs that landed in Japan. So you're not talking about anything that's the ending in relation to the Palestinian resistance. Of course, Israel would want to try to portray it as if, we are annihilating them, we're finishing them off, we're this, we're that. But the fact of the matter is, they told their allies in Western establishments in the beginning, give us a few months, we'll be done with them. That's why there was a temporary ceasefire at the time, because Israel didn't get rid of them after all of that barbaric bombardment in the first few months, where they were killing 1,000 people a day almost in Gaza. Constantly, consistently. Didn't happen. Then the tide started to slightly turn. Israel went into a temporary ceasefire. It broke it, of course. Continuation, other types of deals, till we reached another ceasefire. Israel broke it again, and now we're at the same position. Is Israel, with its control, solid in Gaza? Is Israel coherent? Is Israel harmonious with its own genocide forces inside of the Gaza Strip? Oh no, not at all. Not at all. They're actually fighting each other and almost killing each other. Look at this here. With a weapon and a kettle, a Nahal fighter was seriously injured in a fight in Gaza. The MPCI is investigating. Unusual incident. A fighter in Battalion 931 was seriously injured after another fighter hit him in the head with a weapon and a kettle. Who's the other fighter? Another IDF fighter, but they're trying to use like a language that is not very clear. Internal fighting. The military police has opened an investigation, and the findings will be forwarded to the military prosecutor's office. These people are battering each other. The IDF genocide soldiers hitting each other, killing each other, fighting with each other. If these are not signs of like internal civil war, or a failed state, a failed army, a failed campaign, a failed everything, what is then? People are fighting in between them, supposedly with the war of revival and with Gideon's chariots or Netanyahu's wheelchair or whatever it is, and talking about all of this occupation of the Gaza Strip, and we're going to wipe Hamas in a couple of weeks or a few months. All of that is garbage propaganda. The Palestinian resistance will never be defeated so long as there's a reason for it to exist. And that reason has existed since 1948. With a terrorist movement called the Zionist movement, taking the land by force, expelling the population, not allowing them to go back, and not treating anyone as equal in the land, and continuing its supremacist and racist policies. In 2025, we're not in the 80s or the 90s even, 2025, a regime of national and religious supremacy. This is what's happening between them. These people are fighting each other, almost killing each other. And I'm pretty sure that this is just the tip of the iceberg in relation to the Israeli terror forces inside of the Gaza Strip. Now, moving on to the aid. There were lots of talks about this new Gaza humanitarian foundation going into the Gaza Strip, and allowing aid in line with Israeli demands and in line with all of this talk. But now there's a very big problem. And that problem is just several weeks into this movement forming, this man resigns. Jake Wood resigns. Why did he resign? What exactly happened? Well, he said some really interesting statements. He said that it's not really going to be in line with several things, and I refuse to take part of that. This was the report, and there were multiple other reports too about his resignation. He specifically said the humanitarian principles of humanity, neutrality, impartiality, and independence will not be met with this new organization, with this new foundation. And this is something that I will not abandon, according to him. Ex-veteran, and he is in a movement called Rubicon. Apparently, these people help like people in war-torn areas and allow humanitarian aid. And now he is withdrawing, proving what? Proving the controversies that we spoke about when the report started to come out about this organization, their ties with Goldman Sachs and the financial sector inside of the United States, and all sorts of shady involvement, and of course the influence that's coming from Israel in this humanitarian aid. They want to politicize humanitarian aid. Now, of course, Israel doesn't want to allow any aid in, by the way. Israel wants to starve the people to death. But even their allies who support a genocide and facilitate a genocide, even though they act like they don't, it's like the level of barbarism of this country is even intolerable for them. Therefore, they were like, look, we have to sort something out. Let's come out with a nice humanitarian group. Ex-armed forces, you're happy with them, we're happy with them. What can happen, right? Don't worry. But even this group is now telling you, well, the head of this group, Jake Wood, is saying, no, we're not going to be impartial, we're not going to be neutral, not humane, nor independent. We're not going to be reaching all of that. And I cannot abandon these principles, according to him. That's another blow. This is another blow for the attempt to use the starvation as a tool through the humanitarian aid. And if the United States, and it could be a move from the United States, by the way, who knows? Why? Because the movement is US based. Well, the company is founded in Switzerland so that it can be attractive for donors from all sorts of the world, and so that they can try and hide the American administration's influence on them, seeing as the United States administration has been the facilitator and supporter and backer of all of this genocide, the legitimizer of Israel, diplomatically, politically, with armaments, with money, whatever they need, even protecting them from international law. So that could be a move coming from the United States telling Israel that even that we're going to have to get the aid in the normal ways. And even if we want to talk about the United Nations and UNRWA, for example, they're going to have to continue to operate. In effect, what? Continuing the same thing that happened before, which Israel used to claim was an act of allowing aid to, you guessed it, Hamas, again, to Gaza. Now, at the moment, the very, very limited amount of aid that's going in is wreaking havoc. Why? Because Israel is allowing this aid to go in the night. A couple of bits and bobs of flour and stuff, like not adequate whatsoever for the need of the population. That's why the talks about the aid going in, if a ceasefire is reached, are 1,000 trucks a day, which is double what the normal average daily truck demand going into the Gaza Strip, 1,000 a day for a period of at least 60, 70 days. And that's just the initial phase. Of course, if there's an all-out ceasefire afterwards, or a complete cessation of hostilities, the end of the genocide, and that's it, then you're going to have to talk about much, much bigger quantities going inside of the Gaza Strip.